Hello and welcome to the Understanding Cyber podcast. In this podcast series, we pick interesting everyday cybersecurity topics and give you practical advice on how to navigate them. Welcome back from me, Tom.
And me, Matt.
Today is the second and the final part of our two-part mini-series on Cyber Essentials. The aim of this episode is to offer up the final 8 of our top 10 tips to make your Cyber Essentials journey easier. Plus, we're going to do a bonus tip right at the end of the episode. This is all about the kind of stuff they don't tell you. It isn't on the box. It's not that they don't want you to know it. It's just the kind of stuff you only learn from doing it yourself. So this is kind of here to save you some heartache and get your life easier.
That's great. I mean, last time, if you haven't listened to the previous episode, we covered what Cyber Essentials is, why you should or maybe shouldn't right now get certified, or why you might choose to delay things, and provided our first 2 top tips. If you haven't listened to that episode, we'd recommend that you do go back, have a listen to it. It'll make what comes next much easier to understand. But in summary, for those of you that have forgotten since we last recorded, Cyber Essentials is an NCSC-owned cybersecurity certification standard, and that is administered by IASME. And it's designed to help organizations mitigate the most common cybersecurity risks. So not everything, but just the most common ones. And we gave our first 2 tips to you. First of all, to decide whether Cyber Essentials is right for you right now. And the second one, to know what you're in for. So let's assume we've decided we want to go for Cyber Essentials. We've had a look at the questions and the requirements, and we want to see what we're in for. What is next? How do we get started sort of properly?
Excellent.
So tip number 3, I suppose, if we're doing these in sort of a logical order.
Absolutely, which we try and do. This is the thing, yeah. So you've been on the website, you've had a look at the questionnaire, you've had a look at the infrastructure requirements document. As Matt says, you've done all the good stuff, and you're happy to start. Where do you start? Right, this is a question we get asked a lot. The first thing I'd start with is go back into the infrastructure requirements document and start reading it in slow time. The first thing that you'll come across, which is tip number 3, is know your terminology. Right. Nothing more boring than a glossary or a terminology section, but it's super important in Cyber Essentials. So there are 3 terms that you really need to know. First one, organizational data, and I'm going to read the definition here and be really dull, okay? Quote, includes any electronic data belonging to your organization, for example, emails, documents, database data, financial data, end quote. Why do I care about this definition? Okay, it's quite dry. Well, firstly, before I begin, Cyber Essentials is focused mostly on devices and hardware, okay? The hardware that processes your organizational data. So if a device, an application, a platform, processes, stores, transfers, or even squints sideways through thick fog on a dark night at your organizational data, see the definition I just read out, it's in scope, right? Why is that important? Well, that brings me on to the next term you need to know, scope, right? Read section C of the infrastructure requirements document carefully and figure out your scope, okay? Because the scope drives what you need to care about. And the scope is defined by organizational data, okay? I recommend doing this in buckets, okay? So having things like, okay, what are the corporate endpoints that I care about? Laptops, desktops, tablets. What about corporate infrastructure, routers, firewalls, servers, virtual machines? What about cloud platforms? Business productivity stuff like Microsoft 365. Okay, it's a cloud platform, but it's special because it's your enterprise IT, basically. Bring your own device is another bucket. Corporate devices, another bucket, like corporate mobiles, for example. And then you can address these in turn. Okay, we'll give you some advice to follow. But by thinking about the hardware, infrastructure, operating system, software, user admin accounts, privileges, etc., associated with each of those buckets, it makes your life easier, okay? There's 2 important things to know about scope. First of all, getting it right is really important, and this concept of organizational data is what drives the scope. Do not fall into the trap of thinking you can put stuff out of scope. Now, people always seem to think, Cyber Essentials is rubbish. You can just put stuff out of scope and ignore it. That is absolutely, categorically not true. It's a common myth. It is just not true. You can segregate stuff in your scope via like a firewall or a VLAN, some kind of logical separation, and you can call it out of scope. That's fine. But you need to do something in the real world to make that the case. And if you do that, if you were eligible for insurance before, you're not anymore. Okay, so the Cyber Essentials insurance only applies if you have a full scope, right? Which brings me on to this really this crucial definition. There are more definitions. This is the crucial third one you need to know, is a subset, right? And a subset is defined as part of the organization whose network is segregated from the rest by a firewall or VLAN. Okay, that's basically, you put something out of scope, it becomes a subset. This is how you can stick things away somewhere else that aren't compliant. But that's a formal process. Okay, that's a thing. You can't just make it up and just wave the problem away.
So sorry, just to understand that really clearly, then scope and things that are in scope. Essentially, everything is in scope by default. You can't just say this doesn't count. Cyber Essentials looks at your whole organization, and you have to actively remove something and put a lot more controls in to not assure it.
To the Cyber Essentials standard, correct? Yeah, correct.
Gotcha.
You can't just make it up. So if it processes your organizational data in any way, shape, or form, it's in scope. If you want to put it out of scope, you make it into a subset by doing a thing, which is some kind of segregation. Okay, you can't just wave it away, exactly as you say. So that's tip number 3. Know your terminology. They seem but dry, but they absolutely drive the entire thing. Knowing those terms. So that's
Really
tip 3.
important.
Absolutely, yeah.
I suppose. Tip 4.
Tip 4. Let's do it. Okay. Tip 4, don't go for the online form straight away. There's a real temptation to log in and start filling out everything online, okay? Unless you are absolutely all over it and can sort of, with laser precision, see through to the end of this process, I wouldn't do that. I would take the questionnaire and do it offline. So you can transfer them later on if needed, and it's a much easier way to track your progress and what you have left to do. I would do this. Get the spreadsheet, as I described earlier on, to download the questionnaire, Montpellier, and structure it by having each item of scope, I mentioned those buckets previously, as a separate column next to each question. So you've got, for any given question in the questionnaire, you have one column which talks about corporate laptops, one that talks about infrastructure and networking hardware, one that talks about cloud platforms, and so on. And so you've got different, same question, different types of answer for each one, okay? It makes it much, much more approachable, okay? And what's really nice about this is not all questions are applicable to all scope elements. So you can look at a question, it's talking about, I wish I hadn't done this to myself now. It's talking about firewalls, okay? That probably doesn't concern my bring your own device, mobile phones, okay? That's not relevant for that. And when you go through the questions, you'll see this, okay? But it's a much more straightforward way to break up your answer in a logical way and to approach this as a process, and then you can then consolidate all of those columns into one nice long answer and then bang that in the box on the online form when you're ready to go. Okay, so tip number 4 then, don't go for the online form straight away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And reading my my crib sheet on Tom's 10 top tips for Cyber Essentials, that links quite neatly with number 5.
It does indeed, yeah. And I kind of alluded to this here, but have a plan, okay, or you'll get overwhelmed. I know it's a set of questions, and those questions need to be answered in a certain way. So the temptation is to just run off and answer them. There's more to it than that. The questions, or rather, the answers to the questions are the end product. You need a plan basically to be able to develop those answers. Okay, there's a lot of questions in that questionnaire, and anybody. Mother Teresa herself would be forgiven for getting to the point where you want to storm out and never touch Cyber Essentials ever again. Okay, and for this reason, I strongly recommend creating a plan. Okay, it's really simple to do, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. As I mentioned, open the question set, ideally in spreadsheet format, because it's just so much easier, and everyone loves driving a spreadsheet, right? And just attempt to answer each one. Okay, if you encounter difficulty answering a question, and you will, okay, create a task or an action to overcome it. So have a separate workbook, the next workbook over, that's like list of stuff to do. So let's say we're looking at like section 7 of the questionnaire, which is all about user access control. And we come to this bunch of questions. I think it's 7.14 to 7.17. Don't worry, you don't have to have it in front of you now, but they're all about knowing whether your cloud platforms use multi-factor authentication. So yes or no is like 7.14, 7.15, and then confirming it's enabled for admins and users, right? So create a worksheet with question number in column 1, action or task in column 2, and outcome in column 3. So for this one, I would say, right, I've got to, in column 1, I'm going to put the question down, which was 7.14 to 7.17. My action is to say, go away, speak to all the people who use our cloud platform, so the cloud platform owners. So we've got somebody who uses Salesforce, and we've got someone else who uses Twilio, and we've got someone else who runs our Twitter account, and check with them whether MFA is enabled. And then the outcome in there is I have a list of cloud platforms and a clear statement of whether or not they support MFA, and whether MFA is enabled for admins, and whether MFA is enabled for users, okay? I know it sounds really noddy and really stupid, but it's really important. The reason you have an outcome particularly is that it means if you've completed the action and got the outcome, you are then able to answer the question in a way that satisfies the requirement, or maybe it creates another task, okay? I've worked with customers in the past, and absolutely this probably says more about me than it does about them, where they've been unable to answer a question. So I've given them a task to go away and ask all the people who use your cloud platforms whether this is the case, and they put complete next to it. I was like, oh, cool. What's the answer? And I don't know. The task was just to ask them. I don't have an answer from them yet. I was like, right, okay, cool. So it was that kind of made me realize you need a very clear outcome from this. Which is, I want at the end of this a list of so I can answer that. And the actions and the outcomes could be, find out something, ask someone something, check something, read something, create a list of something, create a policy, implement something. But the end result is a big old list of actions. If you do those actions in a way which delivers the outcome you've put down, you are done. Simple, okay? It helps you know what to do, avoids you getting overwhelmed, and it helps track progress. So every question you attempt, you can't answer it, you create an action plan, and that is your plan.
Okay, cool, brilliant. That's sage advice so far. Though I've noticed mostly you've been covering tips on actually how to approach and manage your Cyber Essentials journey, as we're calling it. So have you got any advice for actually completing the questions or doing the associated actions and stuff?
I have indeed. Yeah, absolutely. So the first one, tip number 6, then, and we're into the, you're doing your plan now, right? Size matters. And this is a classic thing where they don't tell you this until you come to it. Size matters, right? In some cases, the size of your organization drives what you need to do in order to meet the standard. And a great example of this is when it comes to bring your own device. Bring your own device is a nightmare for all sorts of reasons. Technical controls, getting your staff or employees, volunteers to voluntarily install a piece of software that will monitor their phone is not a popular move. Fortunately, if you're small enough, so less than 50 people, fewer than 50 people, excuse me, you can use a policy rather than technical controls, okay? So rather than having to install mobile device management software on all your employees or volunteers' phones, you can say, right, we have a policy and it's an acceptable use policy for bring your own devices. And in there, you write down the corresponding controls that Cyber Essentials wants you to have. Don't install, dodgy applications, make sure everything's kept up to date and so on. I won't list them all out. But yeah, you don't have to do technical controls if you're below a certain size. So size does matter. And we'll mention in the show notes and at the end of this where you can find out where the size comes in and what controls matter when. So that was tip number 6. Make sense?
Yep.
Cool. All right, straight into tip number 7. Another thing that people forget is that Cyber Essentials, it's not just about your organization. Your suppliers and your contractors need to perform too, by which I mean people you buy stuff off and then people you buy in to help you, right? So firstly, suppliers, for example, and the classic one is someone who does your IT for you, an external IT provider, like a managed service provider. You will need to ensure what they're doing for you is compliant with Cyber Essentials, right? It's not enough for them to have Cyber Essentials, weirdly. So it's possible, bear with me, it's possible to have a managed service provider who has Cyber Essentials doing your IT for you, but they're not doing it in a Cyber Essentials compliant way. Because Cyber Essentials is all about them. It's not about you as a customer, okay? So they for their organizational data, they manage it all just fine, blah, blah, blah. They're not worried about your network, okay? So IaaS helpfully provide you with a questionnaire on their website. It's under the Cyber Essentials Guide to Working with an External IT Company. And there's a link to the questionnaire. Basically, you can take that questionnaire, give it to your IT provider and say, here, fill this in for me, and I can use that to assess whether you're meeting the Cyber Essentials standard for me or not. I would, before you send it, just check that it actually matches the latest version of Cyber Essentials, because the last one I sent out didn't quite match. There were some questions that didn't align, and so even though I got the answers back, it wasn't actually terribly useful. So just check, okay? Your managed service provider or IT provider, whatever, may charge you to complete this questionnaire. I've no right or wrong, this is the standard, I don't know, it varies basically. I don't think it's unreasonable for them to charge you. So that's tip number 7, I guess part 1, gusts into tip number 8, which is all about suppliers, okay? Give them a questionnaire if they supply you with something that's in scope. So that's suppliers.
Suppliers. It's probably someone else then.
There is someone else. I mentioned contractors. If you cast your mind back 3 minutes, I've forgotten to. You will need to ensure that if you've got contractors coming in, accessing your network, that any devices that they own or use are also, quote, configured correctly. They explicitly say in the Cyber Essentials standard that how you ensure they're configured correctly is up to you. But what does this mean in practice? Well, you don't have to do Cyber Essentials for your contractors, right? But you should at least ask them or seek some kind of assurance that the devices they're using they do conform to the requirements of Cyber Essentials. The easiest way to do this is to check that they have Cyber Essentials. So we do, right? So if I go in, which I do regularly, go in and work for a customer, they would know this in advance, obviously. But if they were going through the Cyber Essentials process, I'd be like, yeah, put me on a list of contractors, and I can tell you right now that my device is entirely compliant. And here's the proof. So yeah, absolutely make sure not just the people who are providing your IT, but anybody coming in externally to do services for you are meeting that standard, because you have to, not just good practice, you have to meet the standard.
That's great. I suppose the next one is all about, how can you prove it, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And it's unfortunate, but we've encountered situations where people have said they've got Cyber Essentials and actually they haven't, and it's lapsed. And they're like, oh yeah, we're renewing it, we're refreshing it. Okay, that's cool, that's fine, that's your business, but I need you to have it and you don't have it, so I can't get it. So tip number 9, Cyber Essentials certificates are searchable. Okay, it's a thing. There is a register of people, organizations who have Cyber Essentials, and you will join it when you get it, and you can search it, right? So if you go to the portal on the IASMO website, which you can find by hovering over the Cyber Essentials button, and on the right under more information, a little drop down appears. You can select the top entry, which says Cyber Essentials certificate search. And it's literally a text box. You put in the company's name, so you could put in Clear Cut Cyber, hopefully, and you'll see whether they've got an in-date
Frantically doing it now.
Check. But yeah, just because someone's website has a logo does not mean they're in date. Okay, and due diligence is a thing, so you can absolutely go out and search for free at minimum effort to see if they've got it. So that's all about validation, trust but verify, that kind of stuff.
That was number 9.
That was number 9. 10, which is not really the last one because there's a bonus tip, but yes. Number 10, right? And this, despite having done this many times, this still irks me, okay? In Cyber Essentials, cloud is a cloudy issue. See what I did there? The requirements document provides some really obvious, quite standard definitions of cloud services, right? Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. But it can get really confusing about when you're thinking about which specific platforms are and are not in scope, right? If you use Facebook for marketing, is that in scope? It's not software as a service, so probably not. What about Salesforce, Slack, SurveyMonkey, Zoom, Mural, Twilio? There are loads of others. Are they in scope or not? And figuring that out is non-trivial, okay? I'll be honest with you, it can be quite hard, okay? The best way to approach this is to I think, is ask yourself 2 questions. Firstly, obviously, does it process organizational data? The second one is equally important, I suppose, is do you subscribe, paid or for free, to the service? And if so, do you have full control over who has access to your service instance or carries out administrative duties? And if it felt like I was reading something out there, I'm reading out the official IASMO guidance, which is not written in the standard. Okay, that's taken from their LinkedIn group, which I'll mention in a moment in more detail. But yeah, if you subscribe to it and you have full control over who has access to the service and carries out admin duties, then it is a cloud service, it is in scope, and you need to worry about it. Okay, so if you can create users, create admin accounts, that kind of thing. So things like Dropbox, SumUp, Stripe, WordPress, Salesforce, they are in scope because you subscribe to them, paid for or free, and you are able to add, remove users, etc. Zoom probably is, but who knows? So good luck with that. Just going to leave you that.
Leave it on that. I mean, that is 10.
It is 10.
You mentioned a bonus tip, and we have not hidden our bonus tip behind a paywall, I assume.
No, we haven't. No, we can.
What is your bonus tip then?
Yeah, we could really eat this out, couldn't we? And have a little countdown stuff. I'm not going to do that. This is pretty obvious, a bit cheeky, but basically, you're not alone. I've held off giving you these things for the time being, but you're not alone. There are loads of resources out there to help you, not just this incredible podcast or us as people. As we mentioned, I think at the start of the first podcast, I firmly believe that everything you need to know should be free and freely available. Okay, so first of all, know that the requirements document is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, there are loads of NCSC guidance pages that Cyber Essentials sometimes refers to, but really are actually the right answer. Okay, so if it's not in the guidance document, go and look at the NCSC guidance pages. Okay, key ones to look at: cloud security, and I'm not suggesting read all of these, just be aware they exist. Okay, cloud security, passwords, MFA for online services, and device security guidance. Right, it sounds a bit onerous, but they're there for a reason, right? Matt said these are really good standards supported by really good documentation. So go and have a look at those. You'll learn loads, and you'll definitely be able to select the most appropriate solutions to answer the questions in a satisfactory way. Okay. So always NCSC guidance. Great. What else? The IASME Cyber Essentials Knowledge Hub. If you Google that, it will come up. It's got, we'll put the link in the show notes. It's got frequently asked questions, advice, and guidance for different sectors like charities and schools, etc. So it's not comprehensive, but there's a lot in there that is not in the requirements document. So hats off to IASME for putting that together. It's a shame that it's like not held with the central documentation, but maybe that will change in future. Resource number 3, ask IASME. So you can email info@iasme.co.uk and ask them a question. Okay, they, in my experience, are extremely helpful. They have dedicated consultants who do this, right? I would say there's a bit of a caveat. Sometimes they'll just recite the requirement back at you, which is a bit tedious. If you ask them whether Zoom's in scope, stand by to get a definition of IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Okay, but otherwise they're generally pretty helpful. Okay, another thing. The LinkedIn group. There is a LinkedIn group called Cyber Essentials Advice Group that's run by IASME. Loads of people in there asking questions. Have a look through. If you can't get an answer, ask a question. You can search a group as well. The very top of the window, the search bar will allow you to search the group. It looks like if it searched LinkedIn, it doesn't. It searches the group, so that's super helpful. Where else? You're still not alone. Your professional community, especially if you're a charity or whatever, someone somewhere will have gone through Cyber Essentials before. Ask around. Within your sector, people will know what the common gotchas are. And the final one I'd say is ask a specialist. If you really can't get what you need from any of those, ask a specialist. There are assured providers, though any cybersecurity consultancy worth their salt should be able to help you, right? Including us. Especially if you're trying to do Cyber Essentials in a very complex context. Okay, that's where we really come in. But yeah, don't despair. There's loads of help out there. Just take a step back, have a look at those things. We'll stick all the links in the show notes as well. Cool. Sorry, I prattled on a lot there. Hopefully, Matt, you're still awake, still with me.
Just about, yeah.
Sorry, yes.
What? Who?
What now? Good. I think that's enough. We've done 10 tips overall plus a bonus there. Let's see if you can summarize them.
Summarize them quickly. So tips from number 1, if you can cast your mind back, decide whether Cyber Essentials is right for you now, right now, I suppose. If you only get it, you only get certified to get the badge if you need it. Otherwise, aim to adhere as closely as possible to it. Number 2, take a look at the questionnaire and requirements documents early on so you know what you're in for. Number 3, know your terminology, especially organizational data, scope, and subset. Number 4, don't go straight for the online form, complete it offline first. Number 5, have a plan. Use a spreadsheet, generate a set of actions with outcomes that satisfy the questions. Number 6, size matters. If you've got fewer than 50 people, you may be able to use policy type controls instead of technical controls. Number 7, suppliers and things like an MSP. You may need to check any services they provide you which carry your organizational data to ensure that they are secured in accordance with Cyber Essentials. Number 8, contractors. Ensure their stuff is secure in accordance with Cyber Essentials. Number 9, certificates are searchable. If you need to validate a supplier or a contractor, have a look on the IASME website. And number 10, cloud can be confusing. Understand those definitions. Turning it all the way up to 11, get help if you need it. There is a knowledge hub, there is NCSC guidance, there is an IASME email, a LinkedIn group, a whole professional community, and cybersecurity consultancies such as ourselves. I think I'm done. Tom, anything we haven't got any covered?
Nicely covered, mate. Well done. No, I think that's everything. We wish you well on your Cyber Essentials journey. Obviously, get in touch with us if there's anything we can do for you. As I said in the last episode, we provided all sorts of support to all sorts of organizations in all sorts of positions when it comes to Cyber Essentials. So just ask us if you need help with Cyber Essentials or indeed any other cybersecurity support or other certifications. Email us info@clearcutcyber.com or go to our website, clearcutcyber.com. I really hope that's been useful. Matt, thanks for joining me and going through that with me. It's nice for me to get a bit of revision, and hopefully you've picked up enough to be able to go forth and do the Cyber Essentials for the good customers out there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for all your insights. And let's hope we can help as many people out as possible.
Absolutely, yeah. Always a pleasure. So to our listeners, thank you for listening. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next month with another episode. But thank you, and we will catch you then.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.